welcome back to Sweet Script Stories. My name is Eric Gruba, and I am joined by my enlightened co-host, Tim Dietrich. How are you today, Tim?
Good. Enlightened is interesting. I'm not sure what I'm enlightened about, but
Me neither.
sounds
Let's
good.
figure it out.
Maybe I will be
We're
when we're done.
yeah. Oh, I hope so. We are here today to sort of reflect a little bit on 2023. It's December while we're recording this, so a little time of reflection, looking back on the previous year, looking ahead to the next year, and just want to talk about how either ourselves, our businesses, etc., have what we've learned from the last year, how we've grown through the last year, and just look ahead. What's happened to us and what's coming next. So, Tim, how have you changed? What's different for you through 2023?
Um, so when you suggested the topic for this episode, it made me pause and like finally realize, hey, we're at a point in the year where I need to be like looking back and looking forward or whatever.
Yeah.
So I looked back first, and I think for me, 2023 was challenging in ways that I kind of expected it to be to some extent. And then, of course, there were the unexpected challenges that sort of come out of nowhere and blindside you, I guess. And, you and I have talked about this offline a bit. My biggest challenge over the past few years is I've been struggling with chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS, as they like call it. You
Sure.
see it online, stuff like that. I'm not going to go into all the gory details of what that is, because I still don't fully understand it myself. I don't think anybody really does. But
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not really going to talk too much about the full impact that it has had on me over the past few years. But it has been just rough. I've never had to deal with a physical challenge like that. So I've had it for a few years. This year I was able to deal with it, I think, a little bit better than last year. But it was still tough. And it forced me to slow down quite a bit, just in general in life,
Yeah.
but in work especially. So I think I was thinking about it. I think this year I worked about half as much as I did the year before. And the year before, I worked about half as much as I had done the year before that. So my days of working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks have like I just can't do it anymore. It's just been really tough. And you know, it's going to sound weird, but if there's a silver lining in having all this, it is that it has forced me to slow down and really just think differently about what I do with my life and how I work and things like that. So, but the biggest part of that, the biggest challenge has just been learning how to pace myself. There's still days where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling good today. So I'll work, I'll work beyond 8 hours. I'll work 12, and then I might get away with it, or it might catch up with me,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's that. So like that all being said, on the business front, obviously I've had to make some changes. And I think the biggest change that I made was sort of trying again to move away from rather like an hourly billing model to what I would call like a project-based or fixed fee business model. I've done that in the past, and you and I've talked about that.
Yeah.
I know you got away from hourly, I think, like sooner than I did, although I tried it years and years ago. Um, that would be an interesting conversation to have at some point, like why I think it failed before and like how I'm approaching it differently now. But that's
Yeah.
definitely like been a big change in my business. Positive, a positive change. So like in terms of revenue, I'm doing well in terms of like, how the business is doing financially. My workload is down, which is good. So those seem like contradictory, I think, but not
Yeah.
maybe not to you. Like again, that's a whole other topic. And
Right.
I think that just like the projects have been more successful, like there's a lot of benefits to working that way if you can do it. And I would also
Mm-hmm.
argue that I think that anyone could make that switch if they really wanted to.
Yeah. I'll try not to turn this into a pricing soapbox episode, but I
well,
think you're right. I think you're
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could, and I think at some point we've talked about maybe trying to do an episode like this, and I would love to do that at some point. The challenges I've had with all that, though, are obviously like my existing clients who were used to working with me on an hourly basis. I think it took a while for some of them to adjust. Some of them maybe still haven't adjusted to it. Like, I think they expect me to be available almost like if I was on a retainer. I'm not available that way anymore. So I had to, reset some expectations there and things like that. But I think a lot of them are starting to see the benefits of it now. The projects just go more smoothly. And the benefits I think are there for them and for me. It's not like a one-sided thing.
That's the most important thing in a
Yeah,
business relationship. Has to be
it
mutually beneficial.
right. It has made the business just better in general. And as far as the new clients go, I think I don't know what they're expecting, although I think a lot of like if they're out shopping a job, they're probably getting hourly rates and estimates, right? So when I come
Yeah.
in and I'm like, well, I don't really work that way, or I used to, but I don't work that way anymore. Here's how I'm doing it now. I think there's like a certain happiness, like there's a surprise, I guess. And then there's also
Yep.
like, oh, so that's really how it's not like they're saying that's all it's going to cost, meaning like it's not that it's cheap, but they're like, oh, there's no surprises. Like, here's the price. Wow.
That's the key. This
Yeah.
is what you're going to pay. This
Right.
value right here. There's no
Yep.
meter running. That you will not pay a dime more than this or a dime less than this.
Hmm. What I love about it though, the most is that when I quote those projects, when I sit down and I try to figure out what that price is going to be, and again, we probably talk for days about how to figure that out.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I'm on the clock, and I'm more likely to go the extra mile. I think like it's an unexpected, aspect of the projects now, where I don't have to go back to the client and say, "I've got this idea I think would make your project better. It's going to take
Mm-hmm.
10 hours for me to do." It's like, no, I mean, sometimes I'll talk to them about it, but if I know that they're going to want to I'll just do it. It's not going to cost them anymore. Just maybe I'm scratching my own itch there, right? It's like, oh, I wonder if that would work, so anyway, I mean, that's one of the changes that I've made this year is just making that business model change, I would call it. I've
Mm-hmm.
made others too, but I'm going to let you talk for a little bit, and then I'll get back to the other changes I've made. Because you've had some
Yeah.
big changes this year yourself, right? Like at least one big one.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I spent most of the year working at a corporation with a team of NetSuite developers, just a small team in a huge company. Um, and yeah, right at the end of the year here, at the early November, I left that job to go back out on my own again. So here I am. And that's been great. I learned a lot um, working on a team again, I think this was the biggest corporation I've worked in. I've worked in a large corporation before, but I think this one was even larger than that one. Um, so I've got to observe a lot, see a lot, do a lot. It got me thinking a lot about leadership, teamwork, software operations, all this stuff I love to talk about and do. I got to do a lot of that stuff. I got to think about a lot of that stuff. Um, so I haven't really taken the time yet to reflect on a lot of those experiences. I want to and sort of use that to maybe inform, I don't know, articles or whatever comes next. Just I want to start to internalize those experiences a little bit. Overall, it was a great experience. I had a great year, and then yeah, I left to go back out on my own again, start creating NetSuite content again. I'm working with Salto to create content for them as well. And it's been great. It's been fantastic. I love making content. I love coaching, teaching, that sort of thing. So it's been really exciting to get back into that. Um,
I would add that I
and
think the community is excited to have you back. I know I am personally, like, your content was great, and it was what, I think if you talk to any NetSuite developer who got started in the past 4 or 5 years, like, you were the go-to resource, your YouTube channel especially, but then your site and the cookbooks and things like that, like, so welcome back. We're glad to have you. I am.
thanks.
I think I speak for the entire community when I say that. And I think the response you got on LinkedIn showed that, right? I think a lot of people were like, wow, he's back. So
Yeah,
it's
I don't know
great.
how I'm back yet, and we'll talk about that as we look ahead to 2024 a little bit later in the
Yeah.
conversation, maybe. But yeah, thanks. I appreciate you saying that. I think if we go back even further than that, back to in 2021, I think 2020. Now I
Mm.
don't even remember. I stopped. Right, I stopped my business. I took a year off because I was just working too much. I had a 2-year-old son at the time, and I was just like, if I wasn't parenting, I was working all the time,
Yeah.
nights, weekdays, weeknights, weekends, all the time. Even at holidays, if we were traveling, I took my laptop. I was just working all the time. It was miserable, and I didn't have the CFS to tell me, hey, don't do that. Um,
Yeah.
not that not that that's a good thing, but I didn't have the forcing function, I guess, to slow me down. I
Yeah.
eventually had to just decide to do that. So I took a year off, and I think through that time, and then through working at Compass as well, like I allowed myself to not um, try to be the best, try to do everything. Um, I allowed myself to slow down, or I forced myself to slow down, I guess, as well. So I was
Yeah.
burned out for sure. I was burned out at the end when I was running my business. I was frustrated. I was angry, and the things I wanted to do weren't working, and it just was not a good situation in any facet of my life. So um, I think through that, I've learned how to slow down a little bit. Um, I close the computer. I only work in my office for the most part. I don't take a laptop anywhere. If I do, it's for like personal stuff. Um, so I've had to come up with lots of techniques, I guess, to cope with that need to work. I guess that need to always be doing and acting and making progress up and to the right. I've had to come up with ways to not do that. So
Yeah.
I do. I every morning I practice meditation, um, and I have a little like guided meditation I go through, and then I do like a breathing exercise, start my day, and then just have a little mantra that I go through to remind myself that I am not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, and that I am more than my work, and I am more than my business. There's more to me and my life than all of those things. So I have to keep myself grounded and remind myself of those things every day so that the workaholic doesn't creep back in. Um, but that's been great. That's been a really positive change in my lifestyle, in my mental health, in my physical health. Um, all of those things have changed, and I work a lot less now, and the bank account didn't take a hit. So that's the dream, right?
Yeah. Work less and at least make the same amount, but work less and make
Yeah,
more would be even better. So yeah.
make more would be better, but
Yeah. I think it's,
there's a little bit of workaholic creeping into that sentiment as well.
yeah, I agree. It's true. And again, let's could talk for hours about all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm just glad to hear that you identified what was going on with you and you didn't let it get too far. You know, like I went through so many burnout periods and hit the wall so many times that, you know, I said it before, I broke myself, right? And it's just
Mhm.
like the scary thing now is that I think I've broken myself in ways that I fear are unrepairable, you know. So anyway, I like don't let me be a cautionary tale. Like just don't let it get too far. And I'm glad to hear that you didn't and that you realized that like it's not something that you just like decide, okay, I'm taking a little break. It has like you really have to work to not slide into those dark places and bad
Yeah.
habits and stuff. So,
Yeah. And if I'm being honest, I didn't realize it wasn't me. It was someone else in my life uh, who had a conversation with me, and it slammed the brakes on everything. I was like, it was a huge reality check.
yeah,
So it was not me; it was someone else. So I did have a forcing function. It just wasn't. It wasn't me or my body. Um,
yeah. Well, that's good. I wish I had listened to all the people who over the years warned me, you know, like, hey, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to slow down a little bit. And I'd do it for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and then I'd be like right back into it, you know. And I
mhm.
think it's really hard. I think, especially being on your own, you know, there's no boss that's going to tell you like you're working too much. Like you can be your own worst boss. I've said that
Yeah,
before. So it's the, you
that's
know,
that's why my mantra has that in it. Like I am not my business. When you're on your own, it's very easy to wrap your identity into your business, into your work.
yeah.
Like if the business isn't doing well, you're not doing well. If the business is doing well, you could be doing more. Like
Mhm. Yeah, there's
that
always, yeah, you could always be
vicious
doing
cycle.
better. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. And
yeah.
so having to distance myself, my identity, my self worth from the business, it's been and not even the business, because for 3 years I didn't have a business. I wasn't
Mhm.
doing anything. It was still from work. I still had to distance myself from my work, or my my identity, my self worth from my work, separating those two.
Yeah,
And yeah, it takes a lot of work, and that work is not done. It's still ongoing, and will be probably forever.
I agree with you there. It's all too easy to forget the episode you went through, whether it's short or long, and then just it it just you know it becomes it's like an addiction. It sort of it's subtle at first, and then it's like then you realize, wow, this has gotten way out of control.
Mm-hmm.
You know, commitments you've made, how much time you're working, and then yeah. And you know, I love the work I do, and I think that makes it even more difficult. If I was doing
Even
something I didn't
tougher.
like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes
Easier to put it down.
yeah, sometimes you know, I joke and say, you know, I wish I was doing, I don't know, something physical or whatever, where like, you know, the day starts at say whatever 8 a.m. and ends at 5 or whatever, and you went home and you really could just, you know, in the drive home, you could decompress, get home, and be your personal person, not the
Yeah.
business person. So
Right.
yeah, again.
Yeah. When the physical separation, when you work from home, that
Mhm.
you don't have that physical separation anymore. You don't have that commute. You don't have that. Some people don't even have that door you can close to a
Right.
separate office, right? Like
Yep.
everything blurs together, and that gets even harder to disentangle.
I would say that if there was any one thing that I miss about working outside of the house, it was that I would say half-hour commute, but you know, sometimes it was an hour, hour and a half, and you know that would frustrate you. But on the smooth drives home, like you could just like decompress and hopefully walk in the door of your home, your apartment, whatever, and just feel like, you know, you got that all out of your system before you see your family. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm back to being a human again, not some crazy devilish person that had a bad day at work. Although
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, you bring it home. But anyway, we could again, like this, not really what this episode was meant to be about, but I think it's almost impossible for it not to slide into like the category that we're in right now. Like we're talking about just good mental health is really what it is. And,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Like it or not, that was a huge part of my 2023 and the
Hmm.
couple years before. So those are the biggest changes in work that I've been doing. I think at least that are relevant to this audience, this platform.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. What else? Any other big lessons or changes from
Yeah.
2023?
So the other change that I've made in my business really had to do with how I'm positioning myself now. So my positioning statement, if you know what that is, I know that you do, but if like you look it up if you don't. But basically, I'm now kind of like hanging my shingle out there as, you know, I develop custom software for businesses that are running on NetSuite. And that's that custom software part of it that's still very vague. I'm still working on the positioning statement, by the way. But
Yeah.
basically, when I look back at like how I'd like to think evolved or changed as a NetSuite developer. I think I started out like most people, most NetSuite developers, where what I was building inside of NetSuite. So it was a lot of, you know, suitelets and things like that, the normal stuff that a NetSuite developer would do, client scripts, scheduled
Mhm.
scripts, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then, and I think of that as sort of the first phase of the work I've done. The second phase, I think, was, you know, like my focus had shifted more to, instead of building apps that ran inside of NetSuite, I would use the phrase that they were built on top of NetSuite. So literally, I was building web applications that sat on top of NetSuite itself, you know, web portals, those kinds of things. Basically, I was using NetSuite as a web development platform, right? But it was
Mhm.
still very closely tied to NetSuite. And that was interesting, challenging in ways I didn't really expect, but I had a lot of success with it. And then again, like in the past year and a half, now I'm like developing applications that are completely outside of NetSuite, but just integrate with it. So we're talking like mobile apps, desktop apps, web apps that are completely separated from NetSuite, but just have tight integration. And that's the kind of work that I'm doing now. Um, I'm really enjoying it because I think it's the next logical step for me. Um,
Mhm.
and maybe as important, or yeah, maybe more important, is that that's where I'm seeing a lot of the demand from, you know, companies that are in NetSuite, because there's a lot of NetSuite developers out there that you could reach out to, like I said, develop a suitelet or a client script or whatever. And I still do
Mhm.
some of that, but I think the unmet demand, largest part of that, is the kind of apps I just described. You know, I got mobile apps, desktop apps, those kinds of things. Um, so that's been kind of a big shift for me. You know, it's subtle, I think, like when you're looking in from the outside, like what's Tim doing now? Like if you go to my site, it still needs a lot of love to kind of communicate what I'm doing now. But that's what I'm doing. And so for me anyway, mentally, it's like it is a repositioning of sorts. I feel like I still need to niche down a little bit. Like it's too broad of like, oh, he does mobile apps and desktop apps. And but the truth is I love developing all those types of apps. So like just picking one and saying, I develop mobile apps that connect to NetSuite. That sounds appealing, but then I'm like, what about all those other things I do? You know, so I'm struggling with that. That's my challenge. One of my challenges going into next year is like, do I
Uh,
niche down further? You know, so so
well,
yeah,
here's the thing about a positioning statement. It doesn't have to explain everything you could possibly do. It
yeah,
just has to get people in the door. That's all it has to do.
yeah. It's a good
Once they're in
point.
the door, you can describe further what you do. You can branch further from there.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good point. Yeah,
yeah, you don't have to put every single possible option in your positioning statement. All you need to do is bring people into a conversation.
yeah. So, you know, I want to give a shout out to Jonathan Stark, who you and I have followed for a long time. We've talked
Mm-hmm.
about him, I think, on the podcast before, but also talked
Yeah,
offline quite a
definitely.
bit. But he not only helped me and when I talk about this, I mean like reading his books and watching, webinars and his podcasts and things like that. His guidance there and expertise really helped me with both of the things that I've talked about now, which is getting away from hourly billing. That's a huge thing for him. And then the whole
thing.
positioning. Yeah. Yeah. So,
whole thing.
yeah. But just, going back and looking at all that stuff that he's put out helped me to make those two changes this year for sure. Like,
yeah,
he's the go-to person for that. And we've talked about trying to get him possibly as a guest on here. I would love to have him on, sometime next year or anytime.
Yeah.
Like just so that would be awesome. And I think the community would benefit from hearing his ideas, because I think that the standard in the NetSuite community, especially for like freelancers, solopreneurs, and certainly the partners, is we're going to bill by the hour, we're going to set hourly rate maybe for different levels of developers, blah blah blah.
These statements of work and change requests and
right
hour caps, and
maybe it's time to think differently. And I think having Jonathan on to talk about that would be huge. And if we don't end up having him on and you guys want to like look into his work, I know we've had his links in show notes before, but just look him up. Just put Jonathan Stark. Sounds exactly like spelled like you'd think.
I'll add some links in the show notes to his main stuff.
Yeah, it's all. He's awesome. I saw a podcast with him recently.
Prolific.
He's everywhere. Yeah, there was a podcast recently where the person was joking with him and said something like he's Tony Stark's brother, meaning like Iron Man. Or
yeah,
I could see that. Yeah. So anyway, I would be remiss if I didn't actually just give him that shout out, because he's instrumental in helping make that change. So there's that.
Yeah. I followed Jonathan for a long time as well. I know we've talked about him before, but yeah, he just has tons of great advice. If you are on the hourly treadmill and want to get off.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll have some links in the show notes to Jonathan's stuff. It's fantastic.
Yep.
And almost all of it's free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if the stuff that isn't free, like his books I think they're all on Amazon, worth every penny and more. So, yeah. So what about you? Any other changes in this year?
I don't know if this is a change. It's not a change for me so much as an observation. I think especially through this past year, I am seeing so much more SuiteScript, or even just NetSuite, but SuiteScript content.
Mm-hmm.
More people, the NetSuite, the SuiteScript channel in the NetSuite professional Slack has just blown up. There's 4,000 people in there now. There were maybe 1,000 a few years ago.
Yeah.
NetSuite has 35,000 clients now. And I'm just seeing so not only is the community bigger, but I'm seeing way more content. I'm seeing more stuff on LinkedIn, more YouTube channels, things like that. There's more people teaching, coaching, sharing. And I think that's awesome. That's super cool. It's very motivating. It's very refreshing. It's something that this space has needed for a really long time. And so just a positive observation, I guess. I think that's really great. If you are listening to this and you are one of those creators or thinking about being one of those creators, keep it up, do it, get started. This community needs you. There's tons of knowledge and information out there that's just, I don't want to say wasting away, but it's wasting away locked inside people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see even more. And if you have questions about getting started, I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's just a lot more content out there now, a lot more people contributing. I think it's awesome. And because when I got started, first of all, I can't imagine what it was like for you, because I didn't have, you didn't have you to say, oh, right. So I see you as sort of the forerunner, of that, but there wasn't much. And,
No, there was basically what I had was the people in the room with me. Right? I had my coworkers. I had the NetSuite forums, which were fine, and then I
Yeah.
had Marty Zigman. He was the only person putting out any sort of
Hmm.
NetSuite content at the time, and those were like, "Hey, do you have this very specific business problem? Here's how you solve it." Like, it was good to see someone creating, but it wasn't like teaching me how to be a NetSuite developer.
Yeah.
There was nothing other than those two sources, basically.
Yeah. I think it's good now when you Google something that it's not just Stack Overflow that
Yeah.
comes up. You see blogs from partners, blogs from,
Mm-hmm.
independent developers, a lot of good content that's being posted on, like you said, on LinkedIn. I wish that we had like some sort of aggregator of all that stuff, and I've thought about doing that,
There's your
but
next project.
I've thought about it, but I'm like, oh man, I don't know. It would be there's a lot, to point
Mm-hmm.
to and link to and all that
Absolutely.
good stuff, but it doesn't need to be crazy complicated. So if you're listening and you are interested in doing something like that, again, do it. The NetSuite week in review or something, like it would be awesome to see that. Even if it's just like a post on LinkedIn with links, be like, oh, thank you. Because I feel like I'm missing stuff. There's so much going by now
Mm-hmm.
in the feeds and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that is something you out there are interested in, Cooper Press is a great model to follow. They are a business of aggregators. That's all they do is they have a bunch of aggregators that they run, and they build mailing lists off those aggregates. They build podcasts off of those. So like JavaScript Weekly is run by Cooper Press, and he's this I forget his name now. I'll have some links in the description, but his last name's Cooper. But yeah, you just started a bunch of aggregators, and it'd be great to have a NetSuite or a SuiteScript sort of aggregator.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
It really would. It would, then you would maybe don't feel like I do, where it's like, I wonder what I missed this week. If you take even a few days off of LinkedIn now and then you go in and look at your feed, it's like, I don't know, it's
Yeah,
overwhelming. And it's so,
chasing the algorithm.
yeah, right. There's a really good chance you're going to miss something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So I think that's a good observation about NetSuite this year. For me, I saw two trends. One on the development side, I think what we're starting to see now is developers starting to think outside of what I would call NetSuite's UI box, if you will, where everything that's running inside of NetSuite has to look like NetSuite. And, that drove me nuts. And that was one of the reasons why, when I finally realized I didn't have to do that and I built the SuiteQL query tool the way that I did, it was refreshing. Like all the constraints were gone to some degree, right? I still had to build something that ran inside of NetSuite and behaved well. But from a UI standpoint, it was, you know, it's just HTML and CSS and JavaScript thrown into that suitelet. And I know other people have been doing that for a while and had been, but I think we're seeing more of it, like with what people are posting, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
I would encourage people now to kind of think a little bit further outside the box, like try to build on top like I was doing, or maybe give developing external apps a try. It's not for everybody. But again, the demand is there. So like if you're a NetSuite developer and you're thinking, well, what can I do next? Like if you're bored or something, take a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then the other trend that I've seen, and you and I talked about this before, is there seems to be, how I would describe it, like discontent and dissatisfaction, I think, to some degree, from some of the companies that are running on NetSuite. And it's not because of the platform itself, like no technical problems with it, but just like there's a lot of chatter about things like increased pricing, confusion around the licensing program, changes recently about the sandbox accounts. And that's somewhat disconcerting, I guess. Like I don't get involved in any of that stuff.
Same.
But as someone who keeps hoping that NetSuite is eventually going to give us like a developer program that's similar to something like ServiceNow or Salesforce, where we could get an instance for free or pay for an
Yeah.
instance for heavily discounted, whatever. I just think when I see all that stuff about like customers having those issues, I think to myself, oh, the chances of us having access to, again, low cost development instances or what, I just think, oh, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
The, the other
Seem
thing
to
I'll
be
add
moving
too,
away from, seem to be
yeah,
moving actively away from that as opposed
right.
to closer to it.
Yeah, exactly. And that whole thing about the sandbox, like I was like, oh boy. Um, so having said all that, like I go back to the kind of work I'm doing now where I'm building outside of NetSuite and integrating with it in my apps. I think that's what's partly driving some of that demand is because you've got companies now where they're like, I really need to be able to give my external sales force or whatever it is, maybe it's customers, partners, whatever. I need to give them access to data inside of NetSuite.
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy another, 300 seats or whatever, to do that. So they're looking for alternatives. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's good for me for business, but I don't like it. You know what I mean? I appreciate the business, but I'd rather it just be coming at me for a whole other reason. So
Yeah.
and I don't think there's anything that you or I as developers can do to remedy this thing that NetSuite appears to be doing, but you see it mentioned on Reddit, you see it mentioned in LinkedIn, in the Slack. It's not just like one-off things where companies are frustrating. It seems to be a trend.
Right. And I'm not involved in that stuff either, so I don't have firsthand experience, but it is discouraging to see for sure.
Yeah. So I don't mean to be a negative there, but there was a negative observation I made, and I was like, what? It was surprising. So,
Those happen in life too.
yeah. Right. Yeah. The NetSuite walled garden isn't all roses and pretty flowers on the inside.
And there's some weeds to pull as well.
And some weeds that are growing, spreading.
Yeah.
That's what scares me. Yeah. All right. So let me ask you a question. I'm going into 2024.
Yeah.
What are your plans? What are you hoping to accomplish? What are you bringing with you from 2023? And what are you like leaving that behind?
Ooh, what am I not doing anymore is an interesting question. I don't know that I have an immediate answer to that, but that's a good question. What are we going to stop doing? Yeah, I wish I had a big plan, strategy, roadmap for 2024, but I don't. Um, I just don't. My plan, if you can even call it that, is to just re-engage with the community as much as I can and figure out how I might be useful. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm just allowing for a non-linear breakthrough here. I don't have a plan. I don't have the up and to the right steady progression ready. I don't know. I don't know what my business looks like in Q1, Q2. I don't have
Yeah.
plans. I just want to reintroduce myself to the community a little bit. I think this show, picking up this show again, we didn't mention that, but we did that in 2023.
Yeah.
We started doing this again.
Mm-hmm.
But picking up this show again has been a really good start to that. And that's one thing that will keep going in 2024. This show is not going anywhere. Keeping the monthly schedule at the moment. And that's very exciting. I love these conversations. I love bringing in new people to talk to. I love just hashing things out with you. And it seems to be people are paying attention. So that's even better. Yeah, I wish I had like a huge announcement or something like that, but I don't. I just don't.
Yeah.
I know I have tons of ideas. I keep a list, and it's a growing list of ideas of things I could be doing. But I want to learn. I want to learn from the community more. What does it need more than what do I want to do? Because all of those things are things I might want to do, but I want them to be useful, impactful things, not just whatever fancy I have at the moment.
I think the fact that you don't have some formal business plan where, okay, well, the first week of January, I'm going to do this. I think like that shows some change in you anyway, right? I
It
think,
does. Yeah.
yeah, it's like you're going into this with, let's just see where it goes. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a very big change for me. I'm generally very rigorous about planning and structuring and setting goals. And um, I know normally I have like a theme for the year and I have targets for the year and I break those down into 6-week sprints and I plan out 2 sprints at a time and iterate through the year. I don't have any of that. I don't have any of that this
Yeah.
year.
Well, you look happy about it. And I think it's great. So yeah, just see where
I,
it
I
goes.
I want to get back there, maybe to a less intense degree than I was doing previously. But I do want to get back to where I have targets and a structure and start getting ideas to get there. But I'm fine right now, leaving those targets elusive
Mhm.
and exploring. I guess that's all I really want to do. Again, is re-engage and have more conversations with people around the community. So if you're out there, email me. I'm happy to answer. There'll be links in the show notes. Find
Your
me on
inbox,
LinkedIn, all that good stuff.
your inbox will be overflowing. It's
That's
awesome.
fine. That's fine. I'm very good at inbox zero. I will read and respond to everything, but I will do it, and I will do it quickly because I don't like cluttered inboxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's all I have for 2024. There are some things I want to do. Like I've done this before. I've done this in the past. I want to explore a new language that has different paradigms than JavaScript does or than any other language I've learned before. I've done this before with Haskell, a functional language, something I had no idea about, and it dramatically changed. Just doing a few days or maybe a week of learning Haskell dramatically changed for the better. I think my coding style, the way I think about applications and programs. And so I want to do something similar again. I don't know what the language is yet. If you have suggestions, let me know. I'm thinking maybe like Go or Rust or something like that. Those seem very popular and also very different. So maybe do something like that. Maybe I'll put together a video or something or an article about that experience. But I want to do a little experiment like that again.
Awesome. Very good.
All right. It's your turn, Tim. But before we get to that, I do want to mention this episode is sponsored by Salto. Salto is not a consulting company looking to sell you any services. They are instead a software company that has built a powerful DevOps platform for NetSuite teams to manage, track, deploy, and monitor their changes to NetSuite. So if you'd like to check that out, you can check out salto.io, where you can sign up for a free 30-day trial and get a free demo. All right. Back to you, Tim. What does 2024 look like? What are you going into 2024 with? What ideas do you have? What do you hope to do?
Well, it's funny because unlike you, I don't want to say I have like this formal business plan, but I do have a plan. Like I actually have one that I makes sense, is realistic. It's not some goofy pie in the sky thing and it's not super rigid where I'm gonna like, oh, every day I'm gonna log or every week I'm gonna do this. It's just, it's on paper. It's really a text document. Like, okay, here's what I'm doing. This is my business. If I had to go on Shark Tank and pitch it, I think they'd actually, not that they'd ever, but it'd be like, all right, what questions would they ask? Can I answer them? So I feel really good about that. I don't want to go into what the business plan is other than really more of what I said earlier, like really focusing on those external apps and things like that. And then, going back to what I talked about at the top of the show, just trying to continue to find that, I don't want to even call it balance, but just pacing myself so that I don't end up completely broken like I was 2 years ago. That being said, I'm going into this realistically and realizing that some days are just going to be good and some days are going to be bad. And sometimes I can do things about them and sometimes I can't, right? It's sometimes a tough pill swallow, I guess. But
Yeah. What have you found? What, I don't know, tactics or things have you found to be the most helpful or useful in slowing down, in pacing yourself, aside from your body like
yeah.
refusing to operate?
Um, so, making those changes to the business where I'm not billing by the hour has been huge for me. And part of that is that I've come to the realization, I'll back up a little bit. When I first went out on my own, I thought to myself, I need to be billing 40 hours a week, which is just in hindsight, just ridiculous, right? Like
Mhm.
if you work for
Yeah.
somebody else, you don't bill 40 hours a week. You can't. Like it's difficult. And even mentally, it's like, so I made I'm in hindsight, it was a mistake, but at the time it seemed like the right thing to do. I was working on 2 20-hour a week retainers, and I did that for years. So I was billing 40 hours a week out, killing
Mhm.
myself to do it. And then I'd take on a little extra project here and so 40 turned into 50, 50 turned into 60 hours a week. Now, like in talking to people that I respect, people like you, people like Jonathan Stark, other developers, like I'm beginning to realize that there's a certain point at which putting in those extra hours as a developer is just, there's no reward. So it's kind of a long way of saying that I think I'm finally realizing that I can work a 40-hour week, and I still do to some extent, but really half of that, maybe sometimes 30 hours, is client work. And the rest of it is like, so it's working sort of in the business. And then I spend the rest of the time doing whatever I want. Sometimes it's a passion project. Sometimes it's working on the business, like this whole repositioning thing. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's writing a blog post. That doesn't, I mean, I know it's work, but it doesn't feel like work, like client work does.
Right.
So that's one of the things I found that helps. Is just realizing that I don't have to work 40 hours a week. And I don't now because I'm not billing by the hour. And again, it's a big, crazy discussion around billing by the project, value-based pricing, all that, those different flavors of anything but hourly. But I think that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing.
If you're if your only revenue stream is billing by the hour, is your time, then if you stop working, the engine's not, like, the whole engine
Mhm.
stops. And if you
Yeah.
run the engine all the time, it will burn out. It
Yeah.
will run out of fuel. It will
Right.
break down.
So like right now, the last 2 working weeks of the year, I'm like on vacation right now. When I say that, I mean, I don't have any client work scheduled for this week or next, and that feels really good. I did this last year as well. Um, but I think I spent the first week of it feeling guilty about not working. So this year, not so much. Like,
Good.
I don't, I just, and the projects I didn't finish this year that I ran up against a wall, like, hey, I'm running out of time. Just I went back to my clients and like, hey, I'm taking the next 2 weeks off, and pick it back up in January. And it's world changing, life
And the
changing for me.
world
These,
did not end.
all right, yeah. Hopefully those clients will still be there for me in January. I'm being funny. I think they will be. Um,
Mhm.
so there's that. So yeah, I think like that's a big change that I am committed to. And hopefully I can ride out my career, which I really like. I say that I don't plan on retiring. I won't even say anytime soon. I don't plan on retiring ever. I love what I do. I hope I can always do it. But if I were to retire and I just kept working the way I'm working now, be happy to do it. So yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunities and where I'm at in the business and that sort of thing. But I do have like for 2024, I have a lot of like fun things I'm working on. And for fun, for me as a geek, that means programming projects, or passion projects, whatever. It kind of makes them sound like it's just some thing I'm doing just to do, but they really do have business implications. So
Mhm.
the one is, and I don't know that I've ever talked about it on the podcast, but I've written about it on my blog a few times. It's that Allo JS, which is like my goal with that project is to try to make it easier for developers to use JavaScript outside of the context of a browser.
Hmm.
Um, so to that extent, people are always like, well, it sounds like Node. Well, yeah, kind of. The idea is being able to, like, there's two flavors of what I'm working on. One of them is essentially you can run it from the command line, you feed it a JavaScript file, and it just does what you tell it to do. It interprets it. Um, I actually have been working on that for a long time and actually have applications that have been running in production for months that use it. And essentially, you can think of it as a way to, like for me, for my NetSuite work, it lets me run processes sort of like batch processes, very sequential, type programming, if you will,
Hmm.
and run them outside of NetSuite, which has some advantages. Like I'm not consuming resources on NetSuite other than just the occasional hit to whether it's a RESTlet or SweetTalk or whatever. So it's been very interesting, and I'll talk at some point about like how I did it, but it's just weird to be writing programs in a language. It's JavaScript, but it's in a framework that is something you built. It's just weird. Like I can't explain.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to release that in early Q1. It's been privately
Nice.
tested for a long time. I'm ready to kind of put it out there and let the public beta test it. I don't know if anybody would be interested in it. If you're a Node developer, you probably won't. If you're somebody who like thinks they need to learn how to do that kind of thing, maybe this is a good alternative. The other version of it is one that is more like, say, Node, in that you can use it to develop web apps. And basically, it's a web server that lets you write code on the back end it's like tag based, kind of like
Hmm.
PHP or Cold Fusion, and that as it's parsing the page, if it sees a block of JavaScript code that it needs to run server side, it runs it. And so that's much more like Node in that respect. But all of this is really designed to make building those kinds of applications easier to build without all the overhead and complications of something that's more, well, complicated, like Node or
Yeah.
Dino or Bun, all those other variants of that. So it's like a more human friendly way to use JavaScript outside the browser. Here's my tagline.
There you go.
So there's that. The other big project I'm working on, and it's very ambitious, and only I think somebody as crazy as me would try this, is I announced it yesterday. It's called Sweet Browser, and the idea is that you build it's essentially a web browser that is designed specifically for NetSuite,
Hmm.
which again sounds crazy. There are reasons, technical reasons, that I think it's important. It unlocks capabilities that I don't think we have, things we could do, or maybe we couldn't do it all in a normal browser environment. Uh, and I put a little video up on LinkedIn the other day about it, but that's how I'm planning to deliver the next version slash generation of the SweetQL query tool. Um, and I think there's some really interesting functions I can add to the tool by doing it that way. And then there's also other apps that I've mentioned in the past in my blog, like the tool that lets you see the schema, um, one for like building a document, printing locally to local printers, all that. There's just
Hmm.
so many things that it potentially unlocks. It's still in very early stages, but I'm really excited about it. So like when I wake up, my like what do you feel like doing today? So I really want to experiment with that some more.
Yeah.
It's exactly what I need, right? Another project. But those are the biggies. I'm also like, and this is going to sound nuts too, but I had done some work with ServiceNow, you know, like 5 years ago, something like that, and
Hmm.
really enjoyed working with that platform. And there's something in me, like for you, like something totally different. With you talk about another language, that would be something that, like for me, giving that another shot would be like just something very different. Like
Yeah.
so, there's that.
Awesome.
That's
I'll
it.
get links from you for all those. We'll put some links in the show notes for anyone interested in checking that stuff out. Um, yeah, I think getting out of your comfort zone, I guess, or
Mhm.
your what you do every day. So doing something like ServiceNow project or a Rust project or whatever. It just allows you to see problems from a different way, different perspective, see solutions to those problems with different tools. And you can usually bring some of that back to whatever your normal skill set is. So
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's great for anyone to explore sort of around their skill set and without like feeling like the time is wasted. You don't always have to be writing SweetScript to get better at SweetScript. There's a lot of ways you can get
Yeah.
better at it that might not even involve code. You
Hmm.
can learn from just about any other activity, really.
Yeah, I think the other thing about that is that sometimes you take, well, I think you just naturally do this, you take what you know from something you're familiar with, like say SweetScript, and take it to another language or
That
just the
too.
platform
Yeah.
itself. Like for me, some of the things I've been working on over the past few years that involve NetSuite, I'm curious about like, can I apply them to ServiceNow? And is there demand, or do they have it covered?
Mm-hmm.
So that one of the things I forgot to mention earlier too, and this goes to your like maybe trying a different language. I do a lot of work with Zojo. That's
Yeah.
a rapid application development tool. I write about it a lot. I've like
Mm-hmm.
done webinars for them. That's what I use for a lot of those projects that are external to NetSuite. It's yeah, I would encourage you to give that a look. Check it out. I talk about something that's very different from JavaScript. It definitely is. Um, and so, yeah, like last week I gave a webinar on it showing how to build an Android app that integrates with NetSuite. And it's one of those things where like my hope is that it just encourages NetSuite developers to check it out because I think it does help them to kind of expand a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
it would be awesome to have people that do what we do that understand NetSuite and understand a little bit about JavaScript or Zojo rather to like collaborate or commiserate. I don't know, like learn from each other because again, I think that's the future. And what I really like about something like Zojo, you can pick other low code platforms if you want, is that you don't need to be an expert to kind of get that going. You can see almost immediate results. And so, yeah, I'd encourage you to check that out. I'm actually going to be doing more webinars for them going into Q1 of next year. That's the plan. So we'll do one for
Mm-hmm.
iOS, one for web. Um, Nothing super fancy, but just enough to kind of get people to show them like, here's how you could get it going. So yeah, I'm excited about that too. I love to do that kind of thing. It's stressful and it does take a toll on me doing those webinars. But
Sure.
at the time that it's happening, there's like, it's like a rush. It's like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then afterwards, I'm like, phew, it's like being on stage for an hour. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of good things coming in 2024. So I think
You
I'm
say you're
excited about
working
it.
less, but you sure sound busy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does sound contradictory, right? And I said, I love what I do. And so there's a certain joy in that work that's not for a client. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy doing work for clients, but there's that, well, this is my time. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
scratch an itch. I'm going to experiment, you know.
Yeah,
So,
I think I mostly said that facetiously, by the way, but I
yeah.
think there's an interesting thing that happens when you slow down, when you compress the time that you're able to work. Um, you tend to get more done.
Mhm.
This is I saw this when I was practicing the Pomodoro technique. It's a productivity technique where you work in 25-minute intervals, and when know you're only working for 25 minutes, you get a lot done in 25 minutes.
Yeah.
When you have a full 8-hour day laid out in front of you, it's like you there's so much wasted time in there.
Mhm.
But I don't practice Pomodoro anymore, but I do break my day into small chunks. I primarily do two separate 2 to 3 hour blocks, and that's it. And I get so much more done in those because that time is so limited. I have to be focused and I have to get right to work. If I don't, everything like everything is going to collapse and overflow and push. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work with my schedule. I got too many other things going on that aren't work related that I care about, that I want to get to. So, little productivity hack: work less, you'll get more done.
Yeah. I mean, the change I made was, like I mentioned, if I was working 40-hour work weeks, and they were way beyond that for the longest time, I was working morning, noon, night, like now I try to do my client work in the mornings, usually 4, sometimes 5 hours, it depends. And then the afternoons are generally mine. One of the things I started to do about a year ago was I was doing hourly consulting sessions primarily for SuiteQL, but other NetSuite topics as well. And I was trying to do those 2 to 3 times each week. Like I would have blocks that were available, and they were selling out. I kept raising the rates, all this. I finally got to a point where I'm like, I'm not really doing that as much. I don't even know if I'm going to do them at all going into next year. I enjoyed doing them, but they were a huge drain. Like that hour wiped me out. I know that seems weird, but there's the CFS kicking in. And now, so what I'm trying to do is just get the afternoons back for just being not client related at all. Like you said, I'm more productive now in the morning. At least I think I am on the client work. I take a nice break in the middle of the day, and then the afternoon and the evening are mine, And then, it's silly. Well, duh, but it is a life changer. Like when you're not doing that and you go to doing it, it's like, oh, this is how normal people live. There's more to life than work. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think it's good. It's been a good year. It's been tricky, challenging, and I think next year, I'm positive about it, but I'm sure there's going to be, things coming out of nowhere that'll whack me, but have at it. That's life.
Roll with it.
Yeah. But I'm really curious to see how things turn out for you. I'm excited about having you, I don't want to say back in the community, because I know you never really left, but you were quiet, and then,
I was always hovering.
Yeah, we knew you were there. If I needed to reach out to you for some sweet scripting, I'm sure I could have gotten you, but it's just good. It's good to see you back. You seem happier, you look healthier, and I'm really glad. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to do this podcast with you. I've said that a billion times before, but to think that the guy that I like, it's like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing in the early days, the NetSuite days. I'm like, and now I'm doing a podcast with you. I know you personally. It's like, cool. Like, how did this happen? So
sometimes it's really strange. Sometimes it's really cool how small the NetSuite world is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really frustrating.
Yeah, for all the same reasons. Yeah, exactly. But I'm grateful for all of it. And
as am I.
Yeah. I'm glad that people are apparently enjoying the podcast and finding value in it. And I mean, that's what it's all about. Yeah. Cool. Well, are we anything else you want to chat about? Or are we good we're going to wrap 2023 with this?
It sounds like we are. It sounds like we're wrapping it up.
Put a bow on it.
Yeah, all those projects you talked about, all the stuff you got going on, if people want to follow along, where should they go to find out more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, so wow, I didn't even say anything about this, but I've really slowed down on the blog over the past couple months. Not really intentionally, but just I write when I have something I feel like I want to say or share. So my blog's still probably the go-to place to see what's going on. But LinkedIn is probably the best place to kind of get a day-to-day or week-to-week sense of, well, what did they fall off the map or something? Like what happened? That's usually where I announce things. I don't have a newsletter. That probably, like, if we were talking to Jonathan Stark, he'd probably whack me upside the head. He's like, why? I could talk about that at some point, why I don't have a newsletter, but I don't. I did for a brief period of time. I turned it back on and then I'm like, nope, stress of it. Nope, can't do it.
It doesn't seem like you need it. You seem to be doing fine without one. So.
Yeah. It's weird to have all of my ducks or all my, what's the phrase, eggs be in the LinkedIn basket. That is the only social media that I'm on. I do sometimes
Same.
participate in the Slack channel, but not often. I think people have got that covered. Like there's plenty of people there that can answer the questions better and faster than I ever could. So, but I like
Yeah.
to see what people are talking about.
Hmm.
But yeah, but just go to my website. It's timdietrich.me. There's a reason it's not the .com, but I won't go into that. That drives me crazy too. But that's the place. And what about you? Are you going to be back doing the Stoic software site, or like is that going to be your?
Yep, that'll still be the place. You
Okay,
can go to my website, stoic.software. I just ripped it out of WordPress and converted it to a static site, and that's been
cool.
pretty great. I'm not publishing a ton on it, but it will make it easier for me to publish and maintain, keep updated, and
Mhm.
it's way faster. So that's all great. Yeah, stoic.software is the website. You can email me, eric@stoic.software. I'll have links to all this stuff in the description.
Yeah,
But
and
email, I read and respond to just about every email I get.
yep,
So
and we've been joking about this for I don't know how many episodes now, but we really are working on the new version of the Sweet Script Stories website. We're almost there, I think.
oh yeah,
We're trying to line
right,
everything
you're right.
up, and so that would be the place to go to for more about this and to see the these fictitious show notes that like they really will
Yeah,
appear sometime. That's
they
where
will
they'll show
appear.
up. Yeah.
I am waiting on the raw files from all of this year's episodes. And once I get those, I will rip the audio and get them published. I've got all the show notes and stuff written for those already, and including I'll have this one as well. So yeah, sometime probably late December, early January, we should have a new sweetscriptstories.com, or at least an updated one. It might not look, it'll look the same, but
Mm,
your podcast feed should update soon.
yeah. Hopefully it will look a little bit better too. We'll see.
We're gonna
Depends
be
on
there.
whether I really take these 2 weeks off or not.
Yeah, there'll be
So,
a day in probably early January where everyone gets 12 episodes in their feed all at
mhm,
once.
yeah, everybody's productivity will drop because I'm sure they'll race right out and
Sure.
listen. Yeah.
Spend your whole day just listening to our voices.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for doing this with me and for another year of doing the episodes and stuff like that. And yeah,
Yes, thank you as well.
so I hope you have a great holiday and I hope everybody listening does too. So
Yeah, we do have to thank Salto. They're the ones who brought us back together, who
yeah,
forced us to do this. No,
it's like
that's
trying to
true.
get who was it they tried to get for the US Festival or whatever? I can't remember who it was. Was it I know they got Van Halen to do it or something, but there was some band that they were trying to get to reunite and they threw enough money at them and I think they did it. But now that wasn't really our
That's not what happened
motivation.
here.
Yeah, no. Yeah, anyway. All right. So I guess that's it.
I think that does bring us to a close. We've done all the where you can find us stuff. That brings us to a close for 2023. I hope you had a great 2023. I hope your 2024 starts off delightful and exactly the way you want it to. And I hope you join us next time as we continue to highlight interesting stories and people from the SweetScript world. Thanks. Bye for now.